But it really does remind me, and you can cut this from your podcast if this is too controversial, but it
Nothing's
reminds
too
me,
controversial. Do it.
nothing's too controversial for No Script, the podcast.
Uh-huh. Hello and welcome to a very special episode of No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. Special episode today in a couple of ways. One is that this is coming to you in the midst of our summer break. We like to take advantage of opportunities we have to invite guests on the podcast to talk about unique and specific and interesting theater whenever we get the chance. And sometimes that happens during the summer. And so we like to take hold. So today I am not joined by Jackson as per usual. Instead, I am very excited to be welcoming Cora Therber, who is the director of a play opening this weekend in New York City, a play called Untitled Hamlet play by Rory O'Neill. Welcome, Cora, to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I am happy to be here.
Yes, I think this should be a fun conversation. One of the great things about sort of approaching theater from the script side is that when you get out into the production side, there's so many different kinds of people to talk to. Playwrights and analysts and reviewers and directors and designers and actors. And so always fun to get to talk to a director. I, too, am a director. And so when you get to speak like director to director about a play text, a very interesting and unique way of talking. I think a lot of my questions today are about like, now, how are you thinking about this in terms of how that would work from the story to the stage, which I think feels like very director to director conversation.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of my favorite, like when I have director friends come see something I've worked on or I go visit them, we always do want to know about the tiny little details or, oh, that seemed impossible or that was exciting. And really one of my favorite parts about working on any play, but what a delight it is to get to work with a playwright and really talk to them about their work. And then specifically with Untitled Hamlet play, Rory we met just through this project. We had not known each other prior, and she is, incredibly talented and very generous and always such a treat to find a collaborator and an artist who you're able to really gel with. And one of the more fun parts about being alive. So happy to be doing it. Yeah.
Wow, I love that. That's great. I'm going to have to start saying that as part of my daily repertoire. That's just one of the more fun parts about being alive. Yeah, I teach in a college setting. I'm going to have to use that with my students. Rehearsal tonight's getting a little long. Well, guess what? This is one of the most fun parts of being alive.
Yes.
That's great. Yes. It really seems, obviously I've not met Rory and you have, but I've only encountered Rory through the text that they set down in the play. However, you see this now a lot, especially with contemporary writing playwrights. You see now a kind of stage direction that says something like, I imagine this happening, but I don't know, maybe something else will happen. You'll have to figure it out. And this play from Rory, Untitled Hamlet play, is full of those stage directions. Weird and wild things happen. And I love a playwright who just says maybe it's this, but I don't know. You figure it out.
Right. Sure. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. And it also is it was fun to get to meet Rory because that genuinely is her thought. I think sometimes I get nervous. I think, okay, do you actually not care about what happens here?
Yes.
Or
is it a trick?
Are you sort of, right, exactly. Is there a wrong answer here? And I quickly learned that there really isn't. So yeah, that's been a real delight, especially because I kind of work that way as a director as well, where if I don't have a really, really strong first impulse, I'll open it up to the room or I'll ask the actors or I'll, see if anybody else has if anybody had a really clear mental image in their mind when they first read the direction or the stage direction or anything like that. And it's so fun to see all the different ways people come up with it and then trying them out. Or there's a lot of notes in the script about shifts on stage. Yeah. Which are kind of like my enemy. I don't know. I've done other shows with stage directions like that. I'm like, what? Okay, great. Things are always shifting. What do you want from me? So I think with this play, the real fun has been sometimes those changes are really, really drastic, design changes, especially in the lighting, or really, really drastic shifts in mood. And sometimes it's just something incredibly small. And just something that just changes a little bit in the way that one of the actors is speaking to somebody else, or just a slight angling of the body away, and finding the spectrum from those tiny little details to the huge drastic shifts is also really fun.
That's great. It sounds like we have a tremendous conversation about a really interesting play ahead of us. Let me introduce you, Cora, to our audience. Cora Therber is a North Carolina-raised, NYC-based theater artist, director, and educator. Cora's work begins with a love for humanity and connection, with a begrudging acceptance that love might just save us all. They bring empathy, confidence, and autonomy into every room they're in, and they love to create spaces where artists can reach their full potential. Cora's time in the theater has included directing original plays, devising original narrative pieces, and writing and directing Greek adaptations. They've designed set, props, and analog projections. Cora's other creative focuses include analog film animation, collage, and linocut prints. Did I say that right? Linocut?
Yeah.
Just took a shot in the dark on that one. Glad about it. When not working in theater and education, you can find Cora tinkering with vintage film equipment, reading the Dune Chronicles, experimenting with new pimple patches, or eating breakfast food. And again, Cora is the director of Untitled Hamlet play by Rory O'Neill, which you can see if you are in the NYC area or in the surrounding communities, or want to go and see a cool play. This weekend, May 29th through 31st, that's Friday through Sunday, at the John DeSotelle Acting Studio on the corner of 9th and 51st in New York City. Easiest way to get tickets, as you told me, Cora, I think, is to go to the LOVECHILD Instagram. Is that true?
Yeah, if you go to LOVECHILD Theater Co., so theater with an ER and then co, C-O, we've the link for the tickets is in their bio. It's through Eventbrite, so of course they give you this impossible URL to type out. So if you just head to their bio, I think that's the best way to make it happen.
Yes, fabulous. So you'll find a link to that Instagram, as well as we'll have a direct link to the ticketing in the show notes, so you can click and grab it there, dear audience member, if that's something that you want to check out. Really encourage you to. I wish that I could. I'm not local to NYC, but would really like to see this play. Untitled Hamlet play is a play about writing a play, which is, fascinating on many levels, and certainly gets us theater people going. Talk about a play within a play, and Hamlet, of course, has a production of a play within the play, and this has writing a play within a play. Many, many layers of interest and conversation. Looking forward to that. Before we dive in too much further, would like to encourage you to head on over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/noscriptpodcast, all one word, no hyphens, no underscores. That's where you can become a supporter of the show. All of our seasons, all of our many, many conversations are made possible by folks like you who become supporters on Patreon. Our lowest tier has always been, will continue to be $1 a month, $12 over the course of the year. Even at that amount, you are making a huge contribution to conversations like this, to our seasons as a whole. So please check us out, patreon.com/noscriptpodcast, and we will see you over there. Okay, let me provide, Cora, for our audience, just some brief context about the play, the script, where it's been, and then I'll ask you to tell us a little bit about the story. As a director, I teach in my directing classes. Directors are the chief story artists, so it'll be fascinating to hear how you tell the story. That's, I think, the first approach of a director, is to figure out what the story is to you, and that is going to be different between directors. And so I read the play, and then you as a director read the play. It'll be interesting to see how you tell the story. I'm excited for that. Before we do, let me introduce you just real quick, folks, to what we have going on here. Rory O'Neill, new playwright to the podcast. Want to do just a brief introduction. Rory O'Neill is a playwright originally from Los Angeles and currently based in Brooklyn. Rory loves to explore the fine line between reality and a secret other place. Certainly does does that in this play, especially through the lens of complicated and imperfect queer characters. Also a fan of large animals, dirt under your fingernails, and tearing things apart at the seams. Rory is a proud member of Theater Right Now's third writing cohort and the Road Theater Company's Under Construction 7. Their credits include this play at LOVECHILD Theater Company, a play called Meeting Notes at Fork and Shoe Theater Co-op, a play called Dog Boy Supreme at QTC Boston Developmental Residency, a play called Change Diagonals at QTC Night of Shorts, 4 Genres in Search of a Play at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, Cool Water at Full Circle Players, You Should Talk to Someone at the Boston Theater Marathon, Garlic Sounds at Silver Mask Theater Company, and Art Intimates at Edmonds Driftwood Players. This play in particular, being produced by LOVECHILD Theater Company, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about them in a second, but it's also worth noting this play has been named a semifinalist for the She NYC Arts Festival and named a top 20 plays of the year by the Lanford Wilson New Play Festival. It also had a reading workshop at the Black Cat Theater in Chicago earlier this spring. LOVECHILD Theater Company, we love to introduce small theater companies as we can as part of our podcast. Independent organization of artists founded in 2023, dedicated to supporting the creation of new work in our local and long-distance communities. LOVECHILD believes that art and performance are for all people and have committed themselves to building opportunities for theatrical development and production that are both exciting and accessible. LOVECHILD Theater Company was born in chaos, but brought together by collective passion. In fostering a collaborative and transformative environment, they create pieces that reflect their cohort by uplifting voices that they feel speak for them. They aim to create the weird, wild, gory, and glorious theater that they want to see. It consists of a group of young professionals that are dedicated to creating and performing original productions, as including a long list of plays by Kimberly Bellflower, who of course is a big deal right now for John Proctor as the villain, as well as many other plays besides. So you have a chance to check out this play. We'll say one more time and then we'll say it at the end. This weekend, May 29th through 31st at the John DeSotelle Acting Studio in New York City. Highly encourage you to check that out Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And now we get to do the fun part, which is talking about this great script and story that we have in front of us. So, Cora, would you, as the director story artist, tell us about the story of this play?
Sure. Yeah. So Untitled Hamlet play starts off as an individual person-led narrative about a young person in their mid-late 20s who, their name is Casey. They're in their final year of their graduate playwriting program, and they're really, really struggling with the fact that all throughout the past, they've been thought of as the funny person. They sort of have this identity for themselves. They're one of the stronger writers in their cohort, but they really, really struggle with the idea of being taken seriously as an artist and as a person. And then this, all before the show even starts, has sort of compounded and fermented and twisted with their recent breakup with their girlfriend, as well as just sort of the questions of what it is like to be a non-binary person, specifically in theatrical spaces, and specifically as somebody who is really interested in pursuing a method of greatness. And Casey as a person is really, really interested in like the fantasy of being a household name in the theater, or the fantasy of being somebody who's really well respected. But then at the same time, due to, various aspects of their identity, feels like there might not necessarily be a model for that, or there might not even really be space for that. So that's all stewing. That's all in the soup. And then when we start the play, it's Casey's is determined to get this play done, and they've decided that they're going to write Hamlet. Now, Hamlet has infamously already been written, so Casey's take
in
on
fact,
this.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think their professor says that very specifically in their conversation about it. Casey says, "I want to write Hamlet," and the professor says to them, "Well, I think somebody already did that."
Yes, and I think Rory took this line out, and I understand, but there was a really funny line where Casey said in response, "Oh, and I've heard rumors of monkeys and typewriters," but I also, yeah, it's all very funny. So yeah, so that's sort of Casey's thing, but they have this story about how when they were in high school, they were a high school actor, they were cast in the role of Hamlet, and sort of the expectations of what that part, but also the heavy weight that is assigned to teen actors close to becoming adults, and the choices that a person has to make sort of really stuck this role of Hamlet close to Casey's heart. So now they're making a solo show about what Hamlet is, what Hamlet means to them. They'll be performing it. It's for their thesis production. There's also a lot of competition within the playwriting program because only a certain number of plays get presented. Casey's ex-girlfriend is one of the other playwrights in the program. It's all very messy, as these things often are. But essentially, as the play goes on, we see Casey struggle with how to make oneself interesting, how to put value on their own life, how to take themselves seriously, because maybe the person who's been taking Casey the least seriously is themselves. And then they also have this friend Hadley, who is not an artist in any way she would describe herself. She's studying Russian literature, but has a very fascinating life. So as the play goes on, Casey has to deal with the fact that maybe the best story Casey could tell about their life isn't exactly their story at all. And what can we, what do we take from our friends? What stories belong to everyone? What makes a person interesting? Who on earth knows? And then, we see how this echoes through their playwriting cohort, through their personal life. And then we also certainly cannot forget to mention this, through, a Monster Energy drink induced, sleep deprived, graduate school, seasonal affective depression, whatever you'd like to call it.
I remember them well.
Yeah. Casey begins to see visions of the ghost from Hamlet, but it's a little different this time because instead of it being Casey's father or Hamlet's father, it is just, in fact, their playwriting professor, who is still very much alive, who has a lot of opinions about what Casey should be doing, how they should be living their life, and some of them can get quite violent. And come see the show to see if Casey takes heed or not.
Yeah, the ghost seems like an interesting way in because there's of course a massive scene with the ghost at the end of Act 1 that kind of drives Casey forward into what is going to become the major kind of plot development of Act 2. But as you mentioned, this is not a ghost in the sense that this person is dead. Their playwriting professor is just another character in the play in many scenes. And when Casey first sees them, they're like, does this mean that you're dead? And of course, no, it doesn't mean that. But that's an interesting question, like directorially, because it does feel like some scenes rely on Casey's confusion, at least a little bit, as to whether they're seeing the ghost or the real professor, at least for a moment. This kind of, they're seeing both things.
Yeah. It is that complicated mix, and I think also compounded by especially in these, because there's only 4 people in the playwriting cohort in this play, especially in these very insular academic, specifically like theatrical academic communities, the professors do become sort of like mythic creatures. Yes. You don't know them, but you see them every day. And some of them, at least in my experience, I knew a lot about these people's lives. Some of them I knew nothing about their lives, but there is this sort of, this is already a person who is elevated and very close, but also very distant from your life. So I sort of welcomed that. I think in no scene, the Professor Widmore is the character. So when Widmore isn't the ghost, he's still very strange. He's still sort of removed from the dominant social dynamic in each scene, just by nature of that. And I think also in the way of the setup of arts education, the professor often is seen as the person holding the keys to success, but they can't just hand them over. You have to, pass their complicated test that in the end you flip a coin and a million things, and you have to add impossible numbers and all that to have a shot. So I think that I really wanted to welcome, but then also the difference between the ghosts I also just love just a little bit of comedy in these moments, especially with the impossible stage directions of it all and things like that. So, what we figured out with the ghost, this was with a conversation with our costume designer, Amy and I. And Amy and I have worked together before. And I had turned to her and we were talking about the play. And I just said, what if he was just in white? She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, what if every time he's the ghost, he's in the same clothes, but this time they're white? And she was like, I think that works really well. So just little jokes like that. And that was also reminiscent of I had to do a scene from Hamlet when I was in high school, like many people have, and it was
like
very stressful.
Casey played Hamlet in high school. It was a big
Casey
plot
played
point.
Hamlet. Yeah, and it's a big part of, and I related to that because I had to do a scene from Hamlet when I was in high school. I think it also had to do with there was this thing that would happen where because I was openly non-binary in high school. I was going by they, them pronouns at this time, and my teacher had no idea what to do with that. And he had no idea what the right thing to do. So I really think his thought was like, okay, we'll just make you Hamlet. Is that okay? It was just all right, that seems like something, because it's so impossible. So I really do relate to Casey in that way. But I do remember I was in this scene with my English teacher, and she was playing Gertrude, and I was Hamlet. And it was the scene where the ghost shows up, and he's all upset with his mother. And in Act 3, I forget the exact scene, but the ghost was just another one of my classmates in white skinny jeans and a white T-shirt. My age, 17. And I thought, yeah, that's a ghost. I'll buy that. So I think with the ghost, and this is also a lot of Rory's intention, is it's a real, or I try to make it a real celebration of the theatrical form and a real celebration of all the sort of funny, cheap things we've had to do from being 5 years old in the, school pageant or whatever. Those are just my experiences all the way up through adulthood and working in more professional things. And I do just love that the ghost there's a lot of questions that will never be answered,
right?
And how can someone be a ghost if the person's still actively alive and is in fact in the next scene? But yeah, just letting that. There are some questions I really dramaturgically tried to answer, and then there's a few other ones where I just thought, no, I think it's just a ghost. I think he just shows up, and sometimes that's life.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of sort of weird moments that the ghost too. This is one of the stage directions that describes the ghost that Rory provides for you. As a general rule, says Rory, this ghost really fucks shit up. Anytime the ghost is here, things are about to get interesting.
Yeah, and what a great way to also set up the rhythm of the show. And I think in the text, that's also something that's really important. Is the ghost might not make a lot of sense, sort of if you write it all down on paper, but it does. Something happens when he's there, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's enough to just really mess things up for Casey. But that's hard. I mean, playing with what to decide and what to leave unanswered is tricky, because I also don't want to. I have to make sure that I'm 100% confident in choosing not to answer a question, because otherwise it's like, well, if we play that game, we can go too far, then we're not answering any questions, and then the show's bad. So just trying to figure out the mysteries of it all has also been a fun challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And it starts early too, before the ghost even arrives in the I think it's the first scene with Casey and Hadley, where Hadley has provided Casey with some interpretation of Hamlet that they felt like they were missing, and maybe how that changes and develops is another area of inquiry for us later. But at the end of that scene, we get this sort of moment. It says The lights dim. Hadley is no longer in sight. Casey is alone on stage. And we get these voices doing lines from Hamlet. It says the voices become garbled and distorted, almost glitching out through this next section. Casey isn't sure what to make of this. It's haunting. It's probably not real, right? Question mark. And they give you pieces of Hamlet. And that's one of the things that happens really throughout the play is these, there are very realistic, like straight up psychological, dialogic scenes between real people in negotiation with each other over stuff that matters to them. And then there are these unreal intrusions, which oftentimes include direct lines from Hamlet the play. I'm curious how you approach that. How do you read that? This strange other world that's filled with like the most famous play of all time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what you said there, like the most famous play of all time, I think to me that was really the key, because so much of the play is about struggles with confidence. So much of the play is about struggles with like identifying oneself as an artist and figuring out how to market yourself, because apparently that's our job. And having to like define yourself so someone will give you money and all that stuff. And there is just this fantasy of, well, what if everything I did was universally agreed upon as great? And obviously,
it's the greatest
I know,
play ever.
Right. As the greatest, as like amazing. And if you're going to say that you don't like it, which many people, I frequently am shouting out the people who are like, I actually hate it. I think that's awesome. But like, if you're going to, if you're going to say that at a party, you have to back it up. And so
it's
like,
not really taken as a matter of like taste.
Right. Exactly. So that's very interesting to me. So I started there. And then I also think there's this thing that happens, and the play deals with this as well, where people who are like raised on the internet, I was raised on the internet, the people in this play were raised on the internet, and raised in what feels like increasingly more and more like an anti-literary culture, where a lot of times, especially verbal speech, is so hard. And I know a lot of people, and I think this is true throughout time, but I think especially with people my age, when I talk to them, like I'm in my mid-20s, just people who sort of grew up around that, it's really hard to have live verbal conflict, even if it's not, it's good conflict. It's a good conversation to have. It's just our brains, we don't have enough practice, because everything is so like, I sit in my own space and I type it out. Or if I'm going to argue with someone, it's over text and that whole nightmare. So I also think part of the role that Hamlet serves in the play is like as a rescue device for these people who do not know how to talk about themselves. And for people who kind of are also so inundated with archetypes and advertising and, who you should be and what the aesthetic of that is and what exact words do you use to describe yourself as an artist so that you find the right people, so that you make the most money and so that you get successful. And it's so impossible that sometimes it's just like, no, I have nothing to say, but I feel the exact same way that this guy felt in this super old play. That's where I'm at. And I think that's where Casey's at a lot. And I think the struggle to be taken seriously that Casey has is a very real struggle, especially for young people, because again, I think it's so much of, I think the time that Casey as a character, like that time and that space that they needed and that anyone needed to develop a sense of respect for themselves was just inundated. And there's so little free time for the brain to go when the internet is an option. And so I think that's a big part of the reason why they're like, no, I'm Hamlet. Like, I am nothing of the current moment. I don't relate to this. But I do relate to this person who feels quite ancient, but also feels incredibly modern. I mean, Hamlet would love Twitter. Like, let's talk about that. Like, Hamlet would have a field day on Tumblr.com. Hamlet's MySpace would have been, really toxic, but really good. So I think also there's something very comforting in knowing that being prickly or neurotic or sort of off-putting is timeless and is perhaps something that a person can make peace with, as opposed to just this uncurable personality flaw of somebody.
Sure,
who's
it's like it makes a hero. Like Hamlet is a character that makes a hero out of sulking in some ways, which is like,
sure.
You don't get that a lot.
Sure.
He's the people around him are always talking about how depressed and anxious and crazy he is behaving, but he's Hamlet, for goodness sakes. He's the most famous literary character, of all time.
Yeah. And the people don't know it in the play. And I think that's also Casey. Casey's like, I'm a big deal. You just don't know it yet.
Right.
Which is very relatable. I don't forget what I was going to say. Yeah.
But the question of being Hamlet is a really interesting one. And you talked about that earlier, that Casey's like just says like, I am Hamlet. And that is set up as like a question, like a narrative question of the play from very early on in their first conversation with Professor Widmore when he says that Casey doesn't understand Hamlet. So Casey comes and they tell Professor Widmore that they have this idea for a Hamlet play, and they tell Professor Widmore that they have this story of when they played Hamlet as a teenager and they weren't prepared for it, and so they felt the need to get revenge, and that actually gave them some access into the character. And obviously, I'm summarizing all that, but the end of that conversation is this very recognizable academic language from Professor Widmore, who says that Casey really just needs to learn what Hamlet is about, not just what happens in it. And the way that he recommends that they do that is by like, I just think you need to be Hamlet. And so that becomes like one of the major questions in terms of like an inciting incident, if you're looking for what happens in the action. The idea that Professor Widmore says you need to be Hamlet in this like first dialogic scene, I mean, that kind of sets up what Casey's going to be after in the play.
For sure. And yeah, talk about an impossible direction. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? That's impossible. And then I felt this in conversations, like in the performance of the academic conversation, it's not really, it's like a faux pas to say that doesn't make any sense. Like, I think you're being confusing. I'm not dumb. You're confusing. And I love that Casey just has to just sort of say, okay. And yeah, you have to be Hamlet. But I think part of the reason why Casey is so up for the challenge is because Hamlet, through all of his neuroses and struggles and depressions, and also really, let's talk about not great treatment of various people. I'm like the first one to say it. I'm like, you guys, I think Hamlet was kind of mean. I don't think that was cool what he did. But like through all of that, he still maintains respect. And I think Casey, as like a 27-year-old non-binary person in New England, they're like, oh, I feel like if I was that way, I would not command respect.
Yes.
And that is really intriguing to Casey. I think the power that Hamlet holds, and there's also, and we talked a lot about this with Rory and with the cast as well, there also is this sort of, it's, to me at least, it's this very American thing, like this very, like where the definition of greatness is emulating something from Europe that happened forever ago.
Yeah.
Like that's the best thing you can do is just resemble like colonial Europe is very strange to me. And I think that, even now it's like, I don't know where that thought was going, but so that idea. And I think also really, really ties into the notion that was going on in Shakespeare's time with like, you know, the in where he was living, what's happening now, especially in the academic space, the idea that like some sort of violence or some sort of aggression or mistreatment of others is ultimately worth it if you extract something really beautiful by the end. And which is like a very, you know, it's like a very colonial concept. It's a very like exploitative concept, but I think it's something that holds a lot of allure for Casey, because I think there's somebody who has, that they're a person who has not been given a lot of opportunities to play that role, the role of the person who is violent for greatness or is abusive for greatness or is, you know, exploitative in one way or another. But ultimately what they exploit is of such high value that it feels like you can't go against it. I think that is incredibly intoxicating. And so to be given that permission by the professor to say, no, I think you should be Hamlet. I think especially in, you know, a theatrical space where I think if Casey went back and said to said to their girlfriend, like, if they were still together, like, oh, the professor wants me to be Hamlet. Like, imagine being that person's girlfriend. Like, what? Don't
I die in this situation?
Right, literally, it's like, oh, and you just went along with this? Like, that sounds fun. So I think that, but that is so exciting. Like the chance to be something, and also the fantasy of being unburdened, even though Hamlet is incredibly burdened. We can also talk about Hamlet's also not great at being a man. Like Casey has, you know, Casey goes through this, oh yeah, he sucks at it, right? Like that's the whole thing. That's why we're all worried about him. 'Cause he's like, and this is something that I have discussed even before working on this play, but I do love that Hamlet is kind of like, he doesn't quite know how to be a man. And I think neither does Casey. And Casey's not, you know, I think at the end of the day would not 100% identify as a man. But I think they're definitely interested in it. And they're definitely interested in more than they let on. And what a beautiful excuse to explore that, given right there by Widmore and in that second scene of the play.
Well, and it is that like the playing a part of it all that Hadley gives to Casey. So in the Casey sort of starts out with this interpretation of Hamlet that is about revenge. And I certainly don't think that interpretation is as wrong as Widmore seems to think it is. But sure, it's Widmore says it's not big enough, it's not grand enough, you don't get it enough, it's not deep enough. So you need to be Hamlet to get it. And the way forward for Casey in that is this conversation with their very interesting friend Hadley, the Russian literary graduate student, who ends up telling them that they think that Hamlet is about like playing a role. Like trying to be seen in a particular way that you're controlling, trying to manifest by performance how other people perceive you. And that also is an interpretation or idea that comes very early in the play. And so I wonder, like, how does that, it ends up being kind of accepted by Widmore when Casey brings this back to class and says, well, here's what I found and he's, of course, Widmore is very like, yes, you got it. Finally, he says all this stuff. But what we know is the audience, the play's layered and all this great dramatic irony is that Casey really stole that from their friend Hadley. But I wonder about that idea of Hamlet because it's so readily accepted by Widmore. But it seems too early in the play to have grasped something like deeply unique about the play that is like the title character of this play.
Right. Yeah, I also I love those scenes as well because it invites, if you are in the audience and you've read or seen or interacted with Hamlet, it invites you to like think about
and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the great thing about Hamlet is like, even if you haven't, you still probably have an opinion about it.
Right.
It's that popular and famous.
Yeah. And if you don't, I just like, you know, if I have family members or whoever that have never seen Hamlet, I say, well, you know, it's the Lion King. They go, what? Yes. I say, it's the Lion King. They're like, the Lion King is, and then I get to sort of burst that bubble, which is always very fun. But I'm like, yeah, it's just the Lion King, except they're people. So yeah, Shakespeare was really into Disney movies, but yeah, it invites you to think about that, because I also agree that the take about revenge is not as bad as Widmore acts like it is. But I think the
And let me just state very clearly so that I can be on the record. Hamlet is a play about revenge. So what Whitmore's going off about? It is a play about revenge.
And I think it also is such in line with the current theatrical trend, which for better or for worse is like, no, you have to say something new.
Yes, right. And
you
newness,
have to,
yes.
Yeah, and you have to, and not only do you have to say something new, someone else has to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I think and I love that when it works, but also sometimes I've seen, and especially as a student, like I remember, when I was in school and other peers of mine, it is so stressful to feel like at all times you have to be like, the Andy Warhol of your 10-page scene cut for directing class. It's like, it's the scene. Because you're supposed to listen to the text. You don't
get it because you just told me what the story was about. Right. Yeah. The story is the thing. The play is the thing.
The play is infamously the thing. Yes. And also, sorry I can't come up with something better after over 400 years of analysis.
I'm going to come up with something original. Yeah.
And I think that's also the curse where it's like people, I don't think, Casey, I think the thing about revenge is interesting. I think that's interesting. And I think part of the tragedy of what happens to Casey is that they're pushed in this direction of like, no, you need to be 100% original. Yes. And no one's 100% original. That's also part of the lie of like, again, going back to like the American European, like weird, like, especially contemporary now, it's like one person your name is on it and it's you. And you are defined and you are the product and you can sell it, is like, what? And it's such a waste of time and such a stressor.
And as if Shakespeare was doing originals. Shakespeare, the notorious copier.
Right. Shakespeare, who's taking everything and doing all sorts of stuff, and also was saying a lot of different things, like making a lot of takes. So so ultimately, I think that this opinion on Hamlet playing a part, I think that's very accurate. I think that it's definitely something worth resonating with. But at the same time, I think the pitfall that Hadley and Casey both fall into with this sort of, it's also a very romantic view of the play. Yeah. Of like Hamlet, because the parallel is like, it's like the first day of high school.
Right.
So you're 15? Like this fantasy of being 15, this fantasy of trying your best but not quite making it is very interesting, but it's also like, I think, I would not describe Hamlet as somebody who, tried his best but made some oopsies. Like, that's ridiculous to me. Right. It's very, but it really does remind me, and you can cut this from your podcast if this is too controversial, but it reminds me.
Controversial.
Nothing's too controversial for No Script, the podcast. But it feels very Emerald Fennel Wuthering Heights, where it's like when they asked her, what did you think about when you made this adaptation? She said, very plainly, I read this when I was in high school, and this is my memory of what I liked. And it seems to me, I don't know, I saw that movie. I don't know if she went back and reread that book, but it is very on trend to do this thing of like, no, I'm just going to talk about what I thought. Mm-hmm. And I think Casey falls into this trap of Hamlet, where I personally, as a director, I'm of the opinion that Casey has not read Hamlet in its entirety since they were 17. I just don't think they have. Mm-hmm. And I think because also one of my favorite parts about the play, they only reference the famous scenes. Yeah. Like they're not
doing... They do speak the speech. They do to be or not to be. Yeah.
Right, because it's not about actual Hamlet. It's about a good play. It's about being respected. It's about being taken seriously as somebody who also feels incredibly weak at times. And
But it also to me seems like it's about, like, weirdly about almost like the word originality, and whether it means like I have a new idea, which seems impossible. And certainly the characters in this play, all of them at various times, their ideas for their plays are accused of being copies of something else, not just Casey's, which we as the audience know literally is a copy of Hadley's life. But there's this other idea of originality that's like, it's original to me and my experience and authentic to it. And that's where the two interpretations of Hamlet get really interesting to me, because Casey brings Hadley's interpretation back to class, that it's about playing a part. But there's also this revenge thing that Casey brought up. And as you mentioned in your story summary, the fact that Casey's ex-girlfriend is in this class, and Casey in the soliloquies is like, I'm going to show her that I can do it, that I'm a person that is special and worthy of admiration and a great craftsperson and playwright and all this stuff. So the idea that there's a revenge motivation that is authentic to Casey that runs under the pretend, like, I get the playing the part thing from Hamlet. I mean, it's certainly like the end feels very revengey for our folks that will see the play this weekend.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it also speaks to this idea that, you know, as an artist, if you have something in you that needs to come out, it's going to come out. They should have
just stuck with that.
I'm right there with you. The play would be about 5 minutes long. Unfortunately.
Well, yes, agreed.
Right. Right. So, but I'm right there with you. And I think that it's also this thing of like, if you have something within you, like Casey really is like, I want to tell the story about revenge. Yes. And then it gets twisted and
they just got dumped. It's like very personal.
I know. It's very beautiful. It's very personal. And also like, there's also, we've had some new pages with some really heartbreaking conversations between Becca and Casey, and like that struggle and what does that look like? And also getting dumped and feeling like you're not a good person. Yes. Like that's very interesting, but that all gets lost because it's not encouraged. But the thing that I think the play really hits the nail on the head of is it's going to come out eventually. Yes. So either the play is about revenge, or Casey gets revenge, or someone else gets revenge some other way. So running from the problem or trying to act like it's not, that thought or that feeling is not inside you, it comes out anyway. And I think that's very true. And I think it's also, and we see this beautiful moment where Hadley has this really long monologue that's a very personal story about when she like had sex for the first time when she was 15 at church camp with another girl. And it was like this beautiful thing. And it's a great moment. And then the actor Michaela does such an amazing job with it. And then we see Casey try to recreate it, and it's not good. Yeah. It's bad. Yeah. So, and just speaks to, you just got to do your thing. And sometimes it's as stupid and as dumb as that. Like, it feels very PBS Kids to just say, like, you got to be yourself. But it's true. It's true. And it's a shame that that isn't given as much weight as it should be. And also, sometimes you have nothing worth saying about yourself, and that's fine, too. And that's the other pitfall that I think Widmore falls into, where it's, everybody's being pushed to create something wholly original to say about themselves. But then sometimes if you don't have something worth saying, people are either going to lie or they're going to exaggerate. And then you just have to listen to people. And then everybody's wasting each other's time.
I wonder, too, though, if Widmore's mistake wasn't in pushing Casey not to tell something about themselves, but in discouraging the thing that, Casey brought an idea about their experience of playing Hamlet as a high schooler. That, I'm an outside observer, and obviously this is all fiction anyway, but I thought was interesting.
Right.
And Widmore says, no, you don't get it. You have to go deeper. You have to be more personal. And that's where Casey comes up with this copy of Hadley's life and Hadley's interpretation of Hamlet. I just wonder, would life have worked out better if Widmore had been like, you played Hamlet in high school? That's really interesting. Let's see what's there.
Right. I agree. And also speaks to the sort of the skewed timeline that's put on theatrical production, especially in an academic space. Like they talk a lot about deadlines, like, oh, your script has to be done by this point. Your idea, or even when Casey wants to change their idea, it's like, oh, it's a little late in the game, this, that, and the other. And
when we have to hire like freelancers to come in all the different academic posts I've held, the timeline we work on is always just crazy to them.
Yeah.
Academic theater, you have to like think so far in advance. I don't quite know why it is, but it is that way.
Yeah, and you have to make a lot of decisions ahead of time, and things have to get really solid. And there's also funny because once people have been in that world for long enough, I think they can forget how ridiculous it is.
Yes.
So to Whitmore, it's perfectly logical to be like, you're changing your idea? What's going on there? How
could you? A year ahead of time.
Yeah, what? You have different thoughts after an entire summer of thinking?
Yeah.
And yeah, what a shame. And I think in some ways the play really does serve as a cautionary tale for, obviously, you know, I'm not really worried about anyone I know doing all the stuff that happens by the end of the play.
Well, that's what makes it a tale.
Right. And that's exactly a fable. But it is something that I've seen, you know, too many times, people who have a real deep love for the theatrical form or for practicing it in one way or another just get, I mean, it's such an overused term, but like truly get burnt out or discouraged or all sorts of things like that from the deadlines and the timelines and the competition and the people telling you your idea is bad for no reason. Yeah. And that's another thing I love about the play is that we have 3 beautiful scenes that are such, to me, an amazing satire of the graduate critique classroom.
Right.
And it really brings me a lot of joy.
The different playwrights in the cohort at various times in the play, they bring their scenes from the plays they're working on to class, and the actors perform a little of them, and then they get like feedback sessions. And the ideas are all wildly different. There's like a frat farce kind of comedy. There's Becca's story is like almost more like a novel about aliens and deep world building stuff. The other one is essentially a straight copy of Casey's earlier play about clowns, but now it's about mimes. It's a kind of an absurdist tragedy, but they're all, what's really funny about all those as an audience member is that, of course, like we know that Rory wrote all of those. So we like agreed to pretend that these were written by different people when these are all written by the same playwright. And we have this kind of double phenomenological experience of like, we'll live in the story that these are different while acknowledging the craftsmanship of a playwright who can make us believe that there are different voices when it's all just them.
For sure. And it's super impressive. And I was also, upon when I read the script for the first time, really impressed with how Rory was able to keep those scenes comedic. Like, I think a lot of the jokes also are about the experience of like being in a class critique and then someone reads a play and you just don't get it. Yeah. And the sort of out of body experience of being like, oh, we have to take this seriously now. Which to be clear, I'm sure people have thought about my work and my plays a million times. Like we all do it, but we have to pretend.
How do you give criticism too, right? Like anytime anybody says anything negative, they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. And it's like, well, isn't that the point?
Yeah, it's the point, but then it's so like, there's all these lines you can't cross and it's so hard. But the plays also do have a lot of heart to them. And I think my favorite detail about these plays, these many plays within the plays that Rory writes, is that Mila, she's in the cohort. She's very, like Mila has a binder with all her notes perfectly assembled and always has, a full icy water bottle and just is a very peppy, excited person who's just happy to be there. And I love Mila, and her play the mimes getting divorced are gay. And it's so beautiful to me that Mila, who is like a straight woman in the play, and like she also has conversations about it. She's at home and she's like, and I think they're both going to be boys. And just that detail, like that from Rory is so, yeah, it totally evens out her character and just brings all this stuff to light. And I think that's fantastic. Like, yeah, gay mime divorce is so powerful. And we really need more of that in the theater. But
I would see a gay mime divorce play. I'd go tomorrow.
Me too. Oh, yeah.
Instead of 100th production of, Fiddler on the Roof in the Omaha area this year, I want to see the gay mime divorce play.
Yeah, and it would get messy, and we see parts of that. So I think that's really beautiful, and I think it is also this thing of, I too, I've had these experiences in class where when you have a structured critique, like if you offer an opinion at the wrong time, if you ask a question at the wrong time, the venom at which people can really come at you with. It's a very
strange situation. And like as a professor, I'm cognizant of like how to make it work, because the students, of course, are all peers and their like grade is part of it. So you end up in this weird situation where it's like, if I say something negative as a student about your work or something that I would change or a question I would ask or anything like that, like, am I weirdly impacting your grade? And so these like feedback sessions become like just encouragement sessions, which there's nothing wrong with a good encouragement session, but like, how do you get meaningful responses to your actual work in a school setting?
Yeah. And I think that's part of the difficulty of the play where, people are not being honest with one another. Right. And people are.
And you see they like give their feedback and then the scene moves on and like the class is over and they have new conversations that are much more honest about their feelings about the work when they're taken out from the structure of the classroom.
For sure. And and I think also inspires a lot of, it makes it so, this is true in real life, and I think it's also true in the play, it makes it so that then you can't believe it when people genuinely say something works.
Yes.
Because now it's just like the only thing you can believe is if someone tells you it sucks, because then they really mean it.
Any value to those sessions is lost because the encouragement feels forced and the criticism is discouraged.
Right. Yes, and I also I know this is not, the
now we're just like people who've done graduate programs.
Now we're just like, but I think, and as somebody who I love constructive criticism, I love to receive it. I love to provide it. It's not easy. And I think, in a social environment, it's tough. And then I do also think that's part of like Casey Lies, because it is so painful to bring something so personal to the table and then have it just rip to shreds. And it's awful. It's so hard. And then is there a way around it? I don't know. Yeah. But there also is this other element of it where I think Casey is actually able to get more work done on this play and less just sort of decision paralysis, because even if the feedback is in any way negative, it's ultimately not about their life. So it's like a nice buffer.
Yeah, that is interesting. The Casey part of those sessions aren't actually true. It's a performance. Going back to the Casey has to sort of perform. I'm getting feedback on my own personal story, even while, again, through the dramatic irony of the play, we all know that that's not true.
Yeah, and also that the feedback is, and I just also hate this kind of feedback, but the feedback Widmore gives is, wow, thank you for being so vulnerable. And I just think, what does that have to do with writing a play? It's just, it's nothing. And that's what Casey also gets from their classmates. And I think there is this thing that happens where when a person, and I've experienced this, like if I've ever presented work that has any part to do with like my story, or especially if it has anything to do with identity, or, you know, in Casey's story, it's about you know, early on queer sexual experiences and stuff like that. If it has anything to do with that, the majority of the feedback that a person will receive is just, you're so brave. You're so brave.
Right.
Thank you. You're so brave. Thank you. And I'm like, that's not helpful to the artist. That's not helpful to you.
Right.
And just because something is vulnerable does not mean it's good.
Yeah.
And it's tough because I think it does a real disservice to the artist. And I think it's a shame that people are not pushed to give more in these scenes with Casey, that the professor is just happy saying, hey, thanks for telling us about when you had sex for the first time. That was cool.
Right.
Like, what does that have to do with art? Like, you know, it's just, and I think really also speaks to the mindscape that Casey is in, where there's a million different values going on at once, and writing a good play seems to be about everything but actually writing the play.
Yeah. Well, I think it's decided that you and I, Cora, need to work out a new model for grad school cohort feedback sessions, so that we can present. We'll write a little book and we'll present it to, you know, take it around, and we'll see what we can do to solve this problem.
Aggression out. Yeah, I think
get punching bags in the room.
I'm kind of not joking here.
Somatic I think involvement, yeah.
Right. This is the one thing and actors can do this a little, but the moment you leave the acting space, I think it's like, let's all just run 5 laps around the building and then we'll do this. Because like this is an active thing, or let's all go do laser tag.
When my students want to go outside, I usually say yes, and they think I'm like a lax professor, but in reality, it's because they're so much more engaged when they can walk around outside.
Yeah. I became that person towards the later years of my time in college, where I would just bring like 3 to 5 fidget toys to every single class. And I had some teachers, like especially teachers who just fully thought I was just like playing with toys. They're like, you're an adult. What are you doing? And I would just be like, well, here's the thing. Either I sit here doing nothing and I don't listen, or I look like I'm not listening at all and I actually take something in. So I'll let you make the choice.
Click my pen and I make a bunch of noise. Like, at least fidget toys are quiet. Yeah. Well, that is about the end of the time that we have to talk about Untitled Hamlet play by Rory O'Neill. There's a great little thought from the playwright. Casey's asked, as they're writing their play, why they include all the language from Hamlet. And Casey says, honestly, because I just love it. I think so much of the language is so fun to say, and I want to be a little self-serving. Is that bad? And I'm like, that is so... Like, that's this play, right? Like, we just got to get some Hamlet in there. When else are you going to get to do some Hamlet?
And to me, hits to one of the most beautiful parts about being, you know, they, them in your 20s, which is internet fan culture. And how do you go from being a 13-year-old on the computer to an adult in real life? And I think that's also one of my favorite things about Casey is Casey's just like a Hamlet fan. And is expected to be a real adult, but also in many ways is still that 17-year-old kid who definitely stays up too late and might even be writing Hamlet fan fiction. And let's talk about that on you know, on my own podcast, because I know this is ending. I don't have a podcast.
Hamlet fan fiction. That's
I'd write it. That's The Lion King.
That seems interesting. I think that's a different play, but an interesting one. Somebody who writes Hamlet fan fiction. I love it. Well, hey, folks out there, if you want to check out Untitled Hamlet play, you have a chance to see it this weekend at the John DeSotelle Acting Studio, presented by LOVECHILD Theater Company. You can find tickets to that. You can go to the LOVECHILD Theater Instagram. We'll also have some links in our show notes so that you can hopefully access getting those tickets. It's in New York City. Go check it out. Should be a blast. We have been on for this hour with Cora Therber, director of that production. Cora, thank you so much for joining us. What a blast.
Yeah, thank you. This was lovely. Great to talk.
If you want to continue the conversation out there, one of the great things about this podcast is we like to try to inspire other conversations about the play to take place. You can find us. All our socials are at No Script Podcast. Shoot us a message, send a comment, that kind of stuff. You can also shoot us an email, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed our previous season or are looking forward to the season starting in the fall, please recommend us to your family, your friends, anybody you know that likes theater, this kind of conversations about writing, about art making, about that kind of stuff. Send them our way. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all the places you get your podcasts. You can also like our Facebook page, and a link to the new episode appears every Monday when we publish, except not right now, I guess, because we're in the middle of our summer break. But when we start again, it will be every Monday. We will see you then. We'll be back in the fall with the beginning of our next season. Till then, I'm Jacob here with Cora Therber. Thanks so much for joining us.